but I met Edgar, what, a year and a half ago now at a meetup. And he's a philosophist by heart, but make it design. So he's got lots of interesting opinions and ideas and thoughts and theories on things. We're always talking behavioral science and psychology. Heaps of interesting experience. He's been at Canon, he's been at Cars Guide, now he's at Snip, and I guess he'll tell you the rest, but it's going to be very exciting. So thank you for coming along, Edgar. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Eva. Can you guys hear me well? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah, sure.
I was like, oh my God.
I was saying yes, but I was on mute.
Yeah, we can all hear you.
Great. So thanks, guys. I presume that you probably have better places to be having lunch than in front of your computer, but thanks for coming along. This talk is about things that affect users where they join a new company and they want to do proper UX in a role. So that causes frustration, and it's just a bunch of thought prompts in order to manage that frustration and actually make an impact on others. This is roughly the agenda that we're going to be covering. So what people think that UX is, it is funny because it's a topic that we've been talking from the dawn of ages of UX, and it's still not nailed. Like, a lot of people think UX is UI. A lot of people think it's about just making things pretty, which of course, hopefully you will agree with me that is not that at all. So I'm going to be telling you guys what my definition of UX is and how I actually do something with it. And I'm going to start drawing the line between how that definition and the definition that people have of UX causes a problem in terms of the performance that you are evaluated with. But it's not only about the problem, so I'm going to also talk about the solution, which is how can we, or could we, attempt to fix this? And I'm going to make a made up case study about it that is going to be super fast and a quick conclusion. So as we move forward, the first topics are really is the longest one. The last one is the smallest one, and they progressively get shorter. So don't get scared about the length of the first one. So let's jump into this. This talk is going to be for you if your title says UX and all, you spend most of your time doing UI stuff. It's going to be good for you if people around you think that all you do is making things pretty. I heard that comment this morning. I kid you not. I've been working on UX for 15 years, and that keeps being the topic that people think that I come to fix to companies. It's make things pretty. Or if you can communicate the value that UX brings to the table, which is something that we need to get good at in order to make a meaningful impact. Lastly, if none of those apply to you, thanks God, and you're here only because you like all things UX, that's also great. So let's get into it. So what people think UX is. Let me tell you a story that all of us most likely have gone through. It starts months before you actually join an organization, where a company is struggling to improve their user-centeredness. Of course, they don't talk about it like that. They are experiencing growing issues. They are experiencing design debt. They are experiencing bad UX. So they think, it might be worth bringing somebody to help us fix this. The way they are experiencing bad UX is because they can feel it. You see, UX is that thing, like we all feel. The companies feel the same way. Like they get this feeling of there's something wrong about this. I think we should fix it. Or maybe they're a little bit smarter and they have actually metrics around it that they say, oh, the conversion rate is really low. The truth of the matter is that UX cannot be measured. And the reason why it cannot be measured is because it's individual to each of us, and each of us have very independent expressions of feelings. So UX, of course, is that personal feel that gives us a good or a bad aftertaste. It can be after using an app, which we experience through the UI, or it could be after talking to customer service representative. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be UI, right? I keep turning my head here because it's where I looking all the faces are over here. So I'm just looking at you guys when I'm looking over here. So in order to improve that aftertaste, they make a job description where they're basically hiring a UX, and it's beautiful. The job description is great. It has all these buzzwords around it. Like, it has all the right buzzwords. It says usability testing, need finding. It has facilitating.
Attention, the
That's
following
me.
is a test only on the building's fire evacuation system. Please disregard all following alarms and tones.
It's gonna be fun.
The following is a short test only. Please disregard all tones.
Well, I'll stop when this finishes, but if it starts again, I'll keep going. Anyway, so yeah, the job description has all these beautiful buzzwords that we know about design thinking, about facilitating workshops, about communicating with stakeholders and stuff like that. But in reality, when you get in, they will ask you, hey, but can you just make this quick fix on the UI? And it starts from there and it goes downhill, right? So all the roles that I've had, it's just like the moment of tension.
I actually think it's really appropriate for what you're talking about, because this is how I feel when someone's like, just fix the UI and make it pretty, and I'm like,
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm gonna, they say short, it should be it, right? Good, all right, so I'll keep going. So all the roles that I have gone through that, all of them, and I had quite a few of them. So it's been quite an interesting thing, because I only just recently started about thinking, what is it about UX that makes people think that it's UI, right? And I came up with this thing. Other roles like development, they have this sort of expected progression of impact. It's realistic. So when a developer joins, and this is a generalization, of course, it's going to vary from case to case, but let's say that it's real for the sake of the argument. When somebody joins an organization, they are expected to produce an accumulative effect on the impact that they have. So when they start, they have no impact. The day after, they have a little bit of impact, and they build up on that impact through time. But when a UXer joins an organization, the impact is quite unrealistic, because people think that UX is UI, and because UX is UI, they think that we have a bunch of rules in our heads where we just join, and the day after we have all the problems that the interface has, and then we can just fix it by moving a magic wand. So it turns out that sometimes UX is UI. The reason for this is because that is one of the preferred methods for interacting with a company. That's how you do grocery shopping. That's how you do your go shopping for clothes. That's how you engage with customer service, sometimes through chats and stuff. You do banking, you do conferences. Right now, the relationship that you and I have has a particular experience that has to do through a user interface, right? And we all do have that relationship with the owners of Zoom that put the product out there. And we are all just making quick judgments around it. And we all just have like a bunch of, maybe they should change that button from place to place. We were having a discussion just before you guys joined, where it's like, we didn't know that Zoom worked this way and stuff like that. So we all have that in experience through the user interface. So that make it difficult to understand that user interface is different to UX because the UI has an impact on the UX, right? And it's so pervasive that when you talk to people around you, your stakeholders, designers on Instagram, people on your team, they are likely to think, if you ask enough, that UX is UI. And it's really difficult to change that opinion. And what this means really is that the approach to have UX is to have an expert opinion in UI, which I think it's a little bit wrong. So people that don't think UX is UI is probably you, and that's it. Or maybe the other UXer that sits next to you, and that's about it. So in order to make a meaningful impact in an organization, to improve the user-centeredness that they wanted at the beginning, you need to shift the culture of the organization. And to successfully do that, you gotta adjust the expectation of what the UX means. And as I told you before, because I've been working on this for a long time, every single time that I joined an organization, I've done this to different degrees of success, but at least I tried. But I didn't know I was doing it because when I joined, I would say, let's workshop this particular UI, or let's workshop this particular need finding strategy or an ideation session or whatnot. And every single time I was dragging people into the room. And at the end, some of the times I got an aha, that's why we do it like that. Without knowing, I was shifting the culture bit by bit, but I didn't have a plan. I was just winging it. So going back to that reason, when people realize that they need to hire a UXer, you have, on one end, you have product managers or people like them, and you have developers or people like them, and they realize that the thing that they are trying to fix is outside their expertise. They know it exists because they can feel it, but they just cannot come up with ideas, so they're too busy to come up with ideas on how to fix it. And they are right, because UX is a thing that you feel. It cannot be seen, but it's felt through. How easy is a piece of software to be learned? How efficient it is to use? How easy is to pick it up after 1 month after you haven't used it? How easy is to make errors while using it? What is the satisfaction degree that you have after you use it? The problem that we have is that they are making a big assumption that is all metrics based. They look at adoption rate, they look at conversion, at dropout rate, stuff like that. But they don't know how to talk about it. So they start measuring it wrong. How many times have you seen an A/B test done wrong? I've seen it like enough. I just kind of, when somebody's doing A/B test, I don't even get involved because I get annoyed and how they set the test. So, and I'm going to give you an example of what I'm meaning, of what I actually mean. In my current role, we were talking about a new feature that required the user to submit really personal information into our app in certain cases. So, because the kind of information that we're asking just to validate that the user were the user, because it's a financial application, so we had to be really careful with all this information. So before designing, we created a design principle that said we need to make the user really comfortable through submitting their information. And if we look at the 10 heuristics that Nielsen Norman gave us, we have efficiency of use and we have user control. So I said, like, yeah, we can probably draw a line between these two in order to define what comfortable means. So we designed the whole app like that. And when we were done with the design, we presented to the developers. And somebody in the team said, because we added a bunch of features that allow the user to remove their personal information if they didn't want to submit it at the end, right? And one of the developers said, well, nobody's going to use those features. And because we designed with that intent in mind, what I said instead, what I replied to that is, yeah, maybe you're right. They might not use it. But the thing is that if they're going to submit customer information, their information, and they feel nervous about it because it's sensitive information, the experience of going through the flow with the ability to back out, it's way different to the experience of going through the flow with the ability, without the ability to recover from something you've done. So the experience is completely independent from the UI. Because at the end, the UI was going to be used in the same linear way. Most likely people were not going to back out from it, but just having those words around that implied user control were going to have an impact in how people felt about the app. So the biggest problem the UX has, as I tried to imply for the 6th time during the 15 minutes that I've been talking, or 10 minutes that I've been talking, 10, 15 minutes that I've been talking, is that people think that UI is UX, and therefore all the problems that the UI has, or all the problems that the service or product that we have to do with the UI, right? So they look at it like this, tunnel view, right? But instead, and because of that, UX becomes a catch-all phrase for all things UI. UI become the one tangible point they have to fix the app. But turns out, UX is bigger than UI, as we all know. And when you expand your focus, you start looking at all these different issues that you might have not seen in the first place. So please, let's just stop ignoring the fact that UX is confusing, because it is. People don't know that it's confusing. We as designers think, because we all know it, we think that it's not confusing, but it is confusing to other people. People don't know what UX is. They pretend to know. They think it's UI, which is a hard belief to change because they don't know that they are wrong. So that leads us to ignorance, right? How do you fix that? Some other people think it's iterative refinement, where you just take a solution and they just keep refining it until you cannot go further. And there's the last group, which think that we have the UX trigger that we can pull, and then boom, magic happens. But of course, we all know that's not the case. So just to be clear, when people are looking for UXers, they are right hiring the UX role to solve their problems. They are just hiring the role for the wrong reasons. They have a completely misrepresented view of what UX is, and it's far, far, far from reality. And because of this, your KPIs, the way you are measured in the performance that you have in the organization, might be at stake. So let's have a look. So I told you that the first section was going to be long, but then we're going to get shorter as we go. So what is UX? Well, we know that UI is a big part of UX, and that UX is way bigger than UI. we know that UX is a process through which we identify the right problem and iterate on a solution until we get it right. It is a process based on iteration. It is a process based on observation. It is a process based in science. And all of these things take time and money to complete. So if you are not going to be doing usability testing when you join an organization, you know that you're going to be having troubles having an impact on what the UX is. So how does this affect performance? Which is, I was just skipping ahead because I got excited. So let's start again. Good UX takes time. Period. It certainly takes more time than producing a half-ass based solution. Sorry, a half-ass opinion-based solution. So in the eyes of others, even if you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, this might be a problem because they think you need to be tackling quick wins on UI. So this is how it looks like in the organization. You join, and before you join, the quality of the product or service starts declining due to tech debt or design debt. And they expect that the minute they hire a UXer, everything's going to shoot through the roof and the UX is going to become great. It's going to be all unicorns and rainbows, or in this case, Pop-Tarts and rainbows. But the reality looks more like this. They can decide, the minute you get hired, they can design that will start improving if you are doing your job, which is not doing quick wins for UI, right? If you're doing the actual job. But the perceived productivity of the UXer will go down for a while because the UXer requires quite a bit of time before he or she can influence others in the organization. I call this a productivity ghost. Because you coming out of downwards curve and moving it upwards require a set of skills that it's seldom in the job description. Let's look at these skills. So you have that in order to get to a user-centric culture in the organization, you need to do all this: stakeholder mapping, skill mapping, listening to stakeholders, understanding stakeholders, understanding the design process, understanding the design debt, the tech debt, building relationships, building trust, leveraging relationships, cajoling your way into new ways of working, enhancing processes, design thinking, facilitating collaboration, mentoring, stakeholders, designers, stuff like that, to do the right thing. All of these things are what you need to do in order to do a cultural shift. That cultural shift allows you to move from finger pointing to be accountable, from accountability to be vulnerable, from having meetings to having workshops, from working in silos to working with shared ownership of features and products and stuff like that, from a founder-centric design to a user-centric design, from opinions to data, from testing after build to testing with lo-fi sketches and stuff like that, from testing with employees to testing with actual users, from beautiful to beautiful and functional, from functional to desirable, usable, and useful. So you can see where the problem is. So this is a timeline, so not timeline, like a map of all the roles that I've had in the last few years. So I'm gonna start with Hostworks. When I joined Hostworks, it was a while ago, like this was the first one of all the roles that I have on the screen. And when I joined, I was more junior than what I'm today. So I didn't have enough tools, but the culture was quite flexible. So one tool made a lot of impact. When I was working in News Corp, that was different. Not because News Corp is bad, it's just because the culture flexibility that they have there is non-existent. Like, it's quite rigid culture to work for. Therefore, you are not allowed to have, it's difficult for you to use a lot of different tools or influence the way the company works. And if that's the case, you're going to have a really little impact with what you can do with UX. And in turn, see Canon. My team in Canon was great. When I worked for them, they had a let's try it attitude, and then we tried a bunch of different things, and things worked and things didn't work and so on. But it doesn't matter, because at the end we had a lot of impact. Everybody was happy, and it wasn't only about shifting the culture. We actually ended up being vulnerable with each other and relying on each other to do things. Sorry, I did this in two different ways. I like more the other one, so I'm just going to skip this one. So this is the catch-22. If you focus on UI, you're not doing full UX. And if you focus on shifting the culture, you don't deliver what's expected from you. So how do we fix this? Everything starts by starting your with the interview and working for a company that has a growth culture. So you have to probe to see whether the culture is flexible enough or not for you to have a meaningful impact. And you also need to set expectations of what you set out to do and what you are not going to do when you are there. You need to probe for the ability to change the way they work. You need to probe for the readiness, because sometimes they might have a flexible culture, but they might not be ready to change. And you need to probe for stubbornness. And stubbornness might not necessarily be bad. It's just sometimes it can get in the way if it goes unmanaged. So you need to see whether you could manage that stubbornness. On the setting expectations, you need to be flexible about it. You need to let them know that you know your process and that your process is flexible enough. You need to focus on outcomes rather than the steps that you follow in order to get things done. You need to set the expectation that whatever you're set out to do is going to take a little bit of time before you have a meaningful impact, because that's what's going to happen. You're not a magician, and not bad in the organization is a magician, so it's fine. And at the end, you need to work integrating your process with the company process, right? Because they don't have it. That's why they hired you. Once you landed the job, you need to focus on quick wins, which might involve doing a little bit of UI work. But they are the best way to build rapport and build up your reputation. Slow down on the quick wins as you move forward, because if you don't, this becomes like a toxic culture for you, because they're just expecting you to do quick wins all the time. Like, people get used to that. So you need to slow down as you move forward. Also, quick wins are not the best representations of good examples or good representation of companies knowing what they want, right? So we need to be careful, because in order to do UX, we need to actually find needs, not wants. Work understanding the process that they currently have. Spend some time navigating that process. See how your process could integrate with it, instead of just coming up and saying, doesn't work, let's change everything. Communicate your strategy and your workload to people. it needs to be acknowledged that you're working on these things that are more intangible than the UI, so that people know that you're busy trying to make a meaningful change instead of just going around talking to people. Try to get as many aha moments from stakeholders. Do that through workshops. Try to facilitate things that they need instead of things that they want. And they're typically going to be grateful. Sometimes you need to stick to UI, but try to work on the other end too. Don't try to do this all at once, because if you do it, then you're going to get distracted and you're going to end up doing one or the other, and then that's going to typically lead to problems. But see what works for you and what not. But I would say sometimes do quick wins, sometimes do some meaningful UX work and stuff like that. And hopefully with all this, we can move from having this curve, productivity curve, to having something that looks more like this. Because that's what we want. So I'm gonna go to a fake wink case study. In this company, the perception is that UX is good UI, of course. The culture isn't super flexible. People sometimes don't want to participate in ideation sessions. The development manager is great, but he's stuck in his ways. He has an over-engineered app that is built for developers by developers, which shouldn't be the case. Should be built for users, right? So the first thing that I did was to communicate my role and broke it up in, this is what I do. And I said, like, I do design ops, managing design sprints, managing the design system, business as usual, and ad hoc work from time to time. And then I work in cultural aspects associated with design. Cultural stuff is working with people to improve something that worked before, but has created design debt. So we need to refine those edges. So in order to do this, we need to spend the time understanding the process, trying to plug into their process, existing process that they have, getting some aha moments from them. And the way I did this, the first win that I had, is I identified, after learning his process, I noticed that they were only doing UAT, of course, after or validating the software that we were building after they have finished coding the app. So I said, like, we're testing way too late, because by that point we might have the wrong solution. So how about we test early? We implement instead of a feedback process, we implement like a feed forward process, where we get the spec right, and then we test it, and then we do a design in really sketchy way, and then we test with that particular sketch, and then we did that, and the eyes of the development managers lit up, because now he knew that that was going to likely improve the workload in terms of how many fixes he had to do at the end of the sprint. So that was my first win at that particular company. I doubled down after that in planning workshop materials, in explaining the process, creating apparent overheads of that process documentation, because at the end, that was materials that I was going to use with people, so that people could fall back on if I wasn't around, or if they had doubts, or they were too scared to ask. So I would just throw my documentation everywhere I could. And yes, people complained over time. They didn't have what they wanted. Sometimes they didn't like participating in the workshops. That always happens. People have their egos. But sometimes if you make them win, they put their egos aside. And that, my friends, is shifting the culture. So, conclusion. You have homework. I want you to look at what is the meaning of UX in your organization. And don't get depressed. That's part of the homework. If there's a gap with what you see, it needs to be done. I want you to identify the gap and understand how could this be affecting your perceived performance in that organization. And I want you to make other people acknowledge all the activities that you are doing that make UX happen. Make a plan, share it with everybody, communicate it, be a leader, because UX can be confusing. All of others UXers depend on this happening before we get into better, more realistic working conditions. Thanks, guys. I'm writing a comic books now about frustrations that have to do with UX. So if you want to follow my Instagram, do it. Yes.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. Love the comics. Stop me from falling asleep.
Oh, thank
Normally
you.
some people not from your presentation, but I'm just so sick of those plain slides that people have been doing recently that are just like to get the point across. I'm sitting here at meetups going, and I think that was a really fun way to showcase some of that data and some of those ideas. I think data viz is really important, especially after COVID.
Yeah.
And so I love how you've done that. So thank you so much.
Edgar, put your Instagram in the chat.
Oh, sure.
And as you do
so
that,
I was just going to say we're right on the banger of time, but I think there's quite a few people still on the call, which is great. So I think Eva's going to ask some questions. Is that right, Eva?
yeah, I'm just going to pick a few because there's
Right.
quite a lot, but
Yeah.
I can send them to you after if you want to answer the people. It's mostly me, Kevin, and Adrian because we have heaps of things to ask you, but I'll just go one each. So Adrian's first question is, sounds like there's an opportunity for some screening questions for organizations before you join. What are some of your approaches to take to understand how your interview panel and their understanding of UX translates to the rest of the organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, in one of the test runs that I did for this, I actually mentioned it, but I completely forgot about it in this one. So that was Adrian. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so you need to know your process, right? Like, come prepared with what your process is, because if you just come expecting to be told what to do, that's gonna give you like a handicap. So during the interview process, so questions that you could ask to know, because at the end you're also interviewing the company, right? When you are interviewing, is this is my process. Have you ever had? Can you tell me an example of how in the past somebody has come up with ideas on how to improve the process, and what was the impact that had, and how was it welcomed by the team, or did it cause friction? You can do that kind of question, which is actually is having a go almost at the interview process, because it's the nature of the interviews that you ask when you're trying to hire somebody, right? But it's just having a really strong stance on the things that you expect to do. You're expected to be a leader, right? People don't hire, well, good companies don't hire people just to be told what to do. Companies want people just to be active and proactive and do their own thing and to bring new ideas to the table. And that's the company culture you want to work on. So I would say challenge that thought. If you have your process mapped out and you know exactly what you want to do, I think just ask a bunch of questions around how your process could be integrated and times where they have done it, and if there's any particular personalities in the team that might oppose this notion, I think that that's important. I don't know if I answered the question.
He's nodding, so I feel like you did. But he's got lots more, so let's just push on quickly. One from Kevin. What do you think is a realistic support timeline from employees' perspective to allow for a new UX UI team member to make a valuable contribution to a product or project?
Well, it depends on whether they're just gonna put their head down and do UI, right? Because that's the way. They're never gonna do a massive contribution to the team. So if we're talking about like the canonical UX, then I think, well, my experience is that I don't start showing people like aha moments within the first 3 months. Like it takes a little bit of time. Like 3 months would be like an average in my experience, but yeah, 2 to 3 months, I reckon. Before that, all of the ideas are eye rollers. They go like, oh, this guy. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say there's that 3-month rule. 3 months to align and another 3 to like properly settle and integrate, I've heard.
I think it's sort of like, the twitchiness angle. I'm suggesting that, like, people don't get too twitchy in the first month or so because they go, well, they don't know our process, they don't know our way of doing things, and we want them to absorb and become as much of the culture as possible. So yeah, good answer, thanks.
Question from me. I'm going to hit you from behavioral science because I've been reading this a lot at the minute, but basically behavioral science research shows that changing attitudes is more successful when you change your behavior first, and the attitudes kind of like migrate over because they have to. So there's this big design operations thing going on at the moment that everyone's kind of bringing that in, which you keep saying, once you have your process and you know your process, you take that in. So I guess with regards to that, I want to know if you find that to be true. Like, is changing culture more successful if you go in and go, hey guys, as the lead UX, I'm going to set this, let's go double diamond just for the sake of understanding process for us to do UX? Or how?
Yeah, so I have found that when I tell them double diamond, I don't finish saying diamond that they're already falling asleep.
It's just as an example. That was just an example. Yeah, but I mean like a framework like that.
It's an example as well, right? Like people don't get design, and let's be blunt about it. They don't want to know design. It's not their job. Although it is, but it's not. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we all do design. People do design decisions all the time, but they just don't look at it like that. And since they don't want to know design techniques, you cannot teach them to do design. So it's gonna be, I think, you need to lead. Now let's talk about quick wins process-wise. Introduce a concept, like one workshop, ideation workshop, and say like the whole purpose of this is to do this, and let's try it, let's see how we go, and if it doesn't work, we change it. In the company where I work now, I have implemented already like a bunch of different workshops, and I think that we have an actual workshop overload at the moment. And most of them come out with negative feedback about because they are not used to them, because there are too many, and so. But there's a couple that we're piggybacking on that actually have a really positive impact. So we try to copy the model from that. What did we do right in this one? How can we improve that one other using that particular model and stuff like that? So in this case, that's a really nice question, Eva, because in this case, the UX process is like a meta product, right? So you gotta listen to your users, collect the feedback, and refine it as you go, and that's what we've been doing. Yes.
Atomic design ops.
Yeah.
I guess. That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Just my biggest interest, because I find the design ops thing so fascinating. that people are, you said it's a one like case by case basis, but people are trying to ascribe like a process to it, which is, and so double diamond goes. All right, enough about me. Another question from the time/flexibility graph.
Sorry, I'm dropping out. Can you hear me?
So you were just waiting.
Yeah.
Drum roll. Now I can hear you.
Okay, can you repeat this, please?
Is there a scale you apply to this UX tool/flexibility graph that you showed? I'm not sure which slide it was.
I again I couldn't hear. I don't know what's happening with my internet. Which question is it? I'm looking at the chat. Can you text it to me and then I'll try to reply?
Yes, I'll just post it in the chat fresh again, right at the bottom. There you go.
All right. Is there a time scale you'd apply to this UX tools flexibility graph? So the impact has been at the time of my exit, right? Because that's it's of course that's a really good question. I didn't think about it. Yeah, so that's the impact at the time of my exit, and of course, News Corp I was only contracting, and I was there for 8 months. Well, in Cosworks I was 1 year, and in Canon I was like a little over a year. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question. Like at the end, I think that you always need to be pushing to have more impact and more impact. Be super greedy about the impact that you have, because at the end, it's really fulfilling to actually do this, to have an impact in UX, because you know you are doing it for others, and that's pretty rewarding.
Awesome. Do we have time for any more, Kevin?
I think it's kind of close. We're 1 o'clock, so we're about 15 minutes over. So I would think that we probably should wrap, but just wanted to say how awesome this talk has been, and I've learned so much today, Edgar, listening, hanging on to your every word. Very relevant
Thanks,
for
Kevin.
me at the moment, for my own work and for other opportunities. And I can see that we've had people on the call from overseas as well, which is great. Look, I'm glad we recorded it, and just as I said, there's probably another 3 or 4 questions there, isn't there, Eva?
Yeah,
at least, yeah. So I think obviously you've got us all thinking. Just wanted to really thank you for doing this. It's been a real, lunch and learn session. I've really learned a lot today. Thanks. Eva, did you want to say anything else?
I think you said all of it. I'm just sitting here nodding, going, yeah, like it, Kevin.
Sylvia's
Awesome.
still on the call. Sylvia, do you want to add anything, or you?
I have my own questions, but they'll come through.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, I copied the questions to my clipboard, so.
Oh, you did. Oh, brilliant. Okay.
I might be able to answer them offline.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank
All right,
you very
everyone.
much,
Thank you
guys.
so much. And we'll be sending out, obviously, updates and invites for our next Lunch and Learn session. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Edgar.
Thank you.
Rock on.